We're live.
Hello, everyone. There's nobody watching us, so we're going to hang out until people start watching us.
So this discussion about the 3DPL, everybody is able to join. We very much encourage you to take part in this discussion and really make the 3DPL a license that's going to be interesting to adopt and also be functional over time. So we really need your feedback to make it work well. So we've kind of put a lot of thought into it, but on the other hand, we'd love people to make sure we're doing things right. So let's see. I can invite some people. We're gonna just sit here and drink coffee and then get some more coffee.
Ik heb geregeld dat het uitgenodigd wordt. Het gebruikt op Google. Dan wordt het automatisch in contact, staat een automatisch ding. Hè?
All right. Let's first share the link with more people. Richard Horn has shared the invite, so that's good. So we're kind of expecting him to join us as well.
So we do it on the worst
Let's
day.
try to get
we
him
have two. We have two kijkers.
All right, that's good. 2 people. Richard, are you there? All right. Let's make sure that we have some more people in here. If you're watching and if you're actually willing to participate, there's a way to just view as a passive viewer. But if you actually want to be invited as a participant in the discussion, then there's another way for us to add you. I believe that you can, through Google Plus, mention while you're watching, mention as a comment that you'd like to participate, and then we can invite you. Apparently we haven't, or we cannot make this a completely open thing, which is kind of ironic maybe at the same time. So let's see. Since what we'd like to do is get more people really participating. So feel free to post something, post a message to us. You can also use the regular Hangouts chat to send us a message about wanting to join, and then we will add you as soon as possible.
All right.
Let's see.
But we can ask people questions in the chat, right? So just for the people that are here, I am Joris Piels, and this is Erik. And we are here today to talk about 3DPL. And we really want feedback, so we're really going to focus the discussion on talking primarily first about what you guys want and what you want to be talking about, and what you're interested in looking. So we're interested to in chat or whatever to first primarily understand what your either major issues are with the 3DPL or what you want improved most of all. And then we want the entire discussion to be about that as much as possible. So if people could let us know either via Google Plus or via the in chat in Hangouts, just what they generally think are the issues, then we can deal with that directly. And otherwise, we can just walk through the license in and of itself and talk about that. But we'd rather have it focused as much as possible on your particular feedback. And so if people could just let us know what their specific issues are and what they most want to see improved or changed, and then we can center the discussion on this. So if somebody would do that, that's awesome, because then otherwise we'll just have a general discussion about the license itself, and maybe Eric and I can have a discussion. It's also a possibility.
I guess as long as there's nobody here participating yet, and you're not able to send us any messages, we could give some introduction about the motivation to make this license, and during which I will probably be inviting more people into the chat and seeing if you're trying to message us and get on board of the chat.
Yeah. So just generally send us a message, because we really want that to be about your feedback. So initially, if you have very specific issues, we want to address them. So why did we make the 3DPL license? Well, for the most reason, we see that there's a lot of existing licensing products. Let's say if you see them as a product, a lot of existing licensing going on. But most of that is focused on the software world, and it's very much a software game for digital products that don't leave the digital world. And we see 3D printing as digital products that interact with and very definitely do leave the real world, or do enter the real world and do encounter things like liability, product liability, patent infringement on physical products, things like that. And we see a world emerging where there's like distributed innovation, where lots of people, just like the Enable group for us is very important as an inspiration, not only because they make prosthetics, but also because it's like 2,000 people working together from all over the world on trying to create a technology together. And we think that's the future, that companies, groups, people, volunteer organizations will all work together in multiple jurisdictions, in multiple areas where things like copyright and patent may be interpreted differently, or where a lot of individual legal elements may be quite different in terms of liability and things like that. Small differences, like in some countries, if it's a physical structure like a house, the construction company would be liable primarily. The other country might be primarily the architect. So these things we see emerging, and we see that current licensing structures aren't really set up to deal with a world where you've got, on the one hand, a digital product that can be changed by everyone and go around the world, and that product also has a physical manifestation, which is the 3D printed part. Anything you want to add, or?
Well, one thing is what we want to encourage is really collaboration on something that can actually be manufactured, but it is a digital design. And of course, there are existing licenses, so why a new one? That's always a good question. Actually, what we want to see is that a physical part, when you manifest it, it actually helps creating the feedback that you need also to feed it back into the design process. So manufacturing something is essential, but there's also, of course, cost associated with it, and it's also unclear when somebody is a commercial maker and benefiting from something commercial. So if you print something for yourself, does, for example, Creative Commons non-commercial, does that actually work? Because in many cases you'll already be doing something that could be considered commercial use if you're saving money on it, even as a private person. And there's a lot of cases where you can debate that. What we'd also like to see is actually which has become part of the rights melt option that you can actually choose, which will actually make sure that after a certain while, which is what you really want if you want to encourage innovation in any area, you want at some point something to become free for everybody to use. At the same time, what you also want to create is an option for people to earn some of the investment back, so that they can actually decide for a short period to make something slightly more exclusive, but at the same time make this become a free thing. And also allow people to know in advance that it will become completely free for everybody. Because if you don't know something and you're investing in a certain path that's somebody else has started innovating in, and you're going to join in that innovation, you'll want to know actually that you can also benefit from the things that you've added to that project. So that's also helpful to know in advance that something will become cleared of rights. So yeah, that's another part of the license. It is actually a part that also is probably going to spur the most debate. So that's why it's also important to have your feedback.
Yeah, because so it's also so the reason we and so what's you imagine we are a company, a weird company, I guess, in the sense that we are a part of Ultimaker, but then also kind of like a separate part as well at the same time. But we are specifically focused on making, making things malleable, so making things changeable and making things adaptable. And we want it to be easy to adjust and change objects as it is to now adjust images or adjust text. And that's kind of like what we see our mission is to be this kind of tool chain, the end-to-end plumbing of this whole thing. And we saw that the on the one hand, the current licenses inhibited us. And on the other hand, it inhibited our users. And what we were seeing is specific cases in 3D printing that were emerging, whereby, I was on this radio show the other day, and I said it was basically kind of like an upside down Pirate Bay, in the sense that what you were seeing was an individual maker at home wanting to share something under an open source license and wanting to share a thing freely and publicly, was actually getting his content ripped off by a corporate or a commercial company that made money off of it. And this is the actual cases that we encourage or we see emerging, actually.
Yeah, it's about the opposite situations where sort of the big studios, for example, would sue small infringers. And so in this case, it's sort of really inverted. And in one case, it's an odd situation, but we feel that creation is not something that is just interesting for large institutions or businesses to do for profit, but we see a lot of other motivations. And well, I guess this peer-to-peer mode of creation is and will become even more significant. So it's important that it's robust for that model, because that's the group that is also interested in sharing in many cases, and seeing something become have a future instead of being just a small pet project that nobody actually gets to see. And that's really, it's also to some degree inspired by how the RepRap collaboration, of course, occurs. It's a little bit tricky, because a lot of the RepRap things are actually under, for example, under the GPL license, but it's very much unclear when somebody actually manufactures something, when somebody starts making kits, for example, what implications there are, and will the creator of a certain piece of, to some extent, source code or what ends up becoming an STL file, for example, whether they actually hold also can be held liable, for example, for actually making that, because they didn't manufacture the actual part, so it's unclear where the liability lies.
Yeah. And that's, I think, is a key issue for creating the license. A key issue we sought to solve had to do with some issues that, on the one hand, if we would both have an identical 3D printer, or, well, first off, what people think often is you have the same file, you print it out, it's exactly the same. But even if we have the same 3D printer and the same material and the same profile settings, then we may, due to environmental considerations, get a completely different object. And this is a very worrying thing for us, because the current liability type structures are not really, and current IP structures are not really set up to deal with this in any kind of way. They're not really meant to deal with innovation that's this quick, and they always assume that there's kind of, a manufacturer, that is just one manufacturer that controls the entire process. And what we're seeing is, in fact, that it gets separated from a designer, a remixer, and then somebody who prints it out, and maybe somebody else who sells it. And that's, I think, it's an issue that the current legal structures, it's either going to be the original designer in some cases, or the actual person that actually sells it will have a liability issue, and anyone else in the chain, and depending on what kind of liability and what kind of case, what happens. So that's the kind of specific issues we aim to solve with this. So we'd love to get questions from people now, because we can talk about this for a very long time, but just do kind of ask us a question and tell us what specifically you had, because this is not from us to you guys. This is meant to harvest, for us to harvest feedback, and for us to kind of listen to you, essentially, because this is a license we're making because we know that the community in general needs this, and we hope to have the community in general build this thing and use this thing, and it's your product. So we want people to tell us what it should look like, and we're just going to try and make it, let's say, legally the best option and promote it and do things like that with it. But it really is dependent on the feedback. And the feedback we've gotten so far is it's about license proliferation, and that's a worry, of course. And also, yeah, some people have maybe an issue with just generally there is a fine in there. That's also a new thing. Again, it's not really important that things are specifically perhaps not in your agreement. It is, what can we do that would work for you? Because we have noticed that under current licenses, everybody says, oh, there's current licenses and they work fine. Well, if they work fine, then why are most images on most of the largest websites in the world just completely ripped off? And why is there so much creativity on things like Reddit or Imgur and sites like that? Why is there so much that's just being appropriated? And why is there no solution for the individual creator that actually made that cat picture? Let's say, and if we're going to people making entire 3D printing systems or entire technologies, we want to have a way to protect these individuals. So our main point is that we really want there to be some kind of mechanism in there to commercialize this or to dissuade people from stealing other people's innovations or solve it if it does happen. Yeah. So the actual letters of the license, less important to us at the moment, but more about like what kind of types of solutions you guys are interested in.
The goal is really to create a very good basis for a new license by having your feedback early. And we really see this as a process where this is still a draft, but we need something to as a starting point. And so we hope we've made a starting point that at least generates comments and generates a good, insightful discussion, because this field right now is not nearly as important and significant as it will be actually in a few years, because 3D printing is on a very exponential slope, not, I would say, in terms of media attention, because that's probably at a very high point in terms of media attention. But actually after that, media attention actually starts settling down a little bit. That's where actually productivity will actually start to go up, and people will really start, this could really become and will really become something that's part of everyday life. But it will not be something everybody discusses, but it would be really interesting to see people, well, it would be interesting to see if this the license issues that might arise are already at least partially thought about in a license early on.
Yeah, so we don't expect this to be perfect, but we want it to have the right kind of thrust. So our thinking essentially is, because licenses don't solve this problem that much, current licenses, because there's no easy dispute resolution, we put that in there, and because there's no kind of fines, we put that in there. But then again, we've gotten some feedback over the recent days about people saying things like maybe there should be an automatic commercial license in there. Say if someone uses it commercially, that's not like a fine, but then it's like, if somebody uses it commercially, then automatically there's a 5% royalty or something like that.
Well, we're starting to get some questions and some feedback, and I think we should definitely cover that first before we
that's the point.
More,
because, that's the point. We can talk a lot about this, but the idea is to talk on behalf of your questions. So, Mark, what's the bottom? Okay, sorry. Mark Peters asks. Oh no, that was a technical problem. Okay. So Adam J, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, wants to talk about the definition of non-commercial use. Okay, so there's two ways we can talk about this, and it's either philosophically, let's say, or just like whatever the fine letters of the law would do. And tons of licenses have had a lot of problems with defining commercial and non-commercial. This is why in the license we've come up with somehow our own definition, and this is also things we've gotten feedback on, but again, this is a work in progress. We define this as an intent on making money from the file, and the reason for this is it's very much based on this would need us to for a certain extent to if there is a dispute on this contract to kind of have an issue with proving intent. It could be made simpler in that sense. Having said that, it's our definition or our attempt to define this, and we'd be open to other different definitions. What we base this on is the idea that what we notice that the community really wants, and the community really has problems with, is really the whole idea is, I spend I spend 100 hours making this extruder, and I'm okay to give it to everyone, but I don't want the other guy to sell it for $50. So we also don't want this to be a very, very complex thing where people are saying, how are you making money from it, or is it commercial, or is it non-commercial? But in the sense is, if someone is intending to make a business model out of this and offering this thing for sale, for example, then it should be very easy for the person to claim some kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing.
But I have to note that the thing you're saying right now is not part of the list of definitions right now. So if you're listening, actually, we'd love for you to tell us whether that kind of definition would make sense. Yeah, I think anything actually is up for discussion, because well, we did actually put quite a bit of time on it discussing this, but there's a limit to what you can achieve in terms of quality if you do it with a few persons. And well, I would say many eyes make all ducks shallow.
No, it's all. No.
Yeah.
But it's what is it again now? And given enough eyeballs, but given enough eyeballs, given enough eyeballs, all things are shallow, of course. Okay, so the next question, if you want to revisit the non-commercial thing, I mean, we can talk about it kind of in a very narrow legal way, but just mainly know that we've defined it as like the intent to make money from it, and that could be directly or indirectly. But what we're really seeing is the highest level of concern is either selling something, so selling the actual product, or selling the file. Or using that using the actual file in a product for a sale. The next question is what's this? Okay, this is Jeff. How do you see it being adapted in different geographic locations? Is a question by Scott Knowles. So basically, there's two different ways of doing this, and then one is just to throw the license out there and hope it survives. Or we can go into a process of internationalizing the license, which would be to get lawyers from different territories. Usually, if you're talking about large licenses, this is done for not every country in the world, but only several, or the largest ones like Germany, Japan, US, that kind of thing. And then this is a process where they would internationalize the license, say, is there anything in here that's in conflict with French law, for example? So the license itself is essentially it's like a contract, so you can use it almost anywhere and you can do anything. And the question is, of course, what is if this license conflicts with Japanese law specifically, and there's something in there that's totally not okay with Japanese law, there might be a problem if there is ever a dispute with it, with a person or a file or something in Japan. So that's why internationalizing it is a process we can go into.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I should say that in advance.
Oh yeah, I'm also not a lawyer. None of this constitutes any legal advice.
But actually, importantly, for example, one thing I do know is that, for example, consumer protection laws are very different, and they vary a lot across countries. And so there might be actually certain aspects that might need more specific elaboration on in a certain territory, but I think it also will become important to look at other licenses, for example, like Creative Commons, GPL, how they have become internationalized. So yeah, that's a good point.
This is a point.
Yeah, and actually, if you do have any pointers on that, because if you've asked this question, you may have ideas about how other licenses either have sort of face this issue, or how this is problematic in other licenses. So if you've seen some there's some do's and don'ts that you know about, then we'd love to know about that in advance.
So Richard Horn, perhaps better known as Rich Rapp, asked us a question that a competing site, would you imagine if it's okay for them to use the license? Definitely. We definitely want to also hear from them, to also to hear from them about what they want us to change about it. This is something we're doing for the community at large, so individual people sharing models, service bureaus, online 3D printing services, but also direct competitors. The world is so small, I don't think we really have competitors in the sense that there's 7 billion people that haven't used the technology, and a couple of people that have one of these things in a room, or a couple of companies that have this. So it's very, very small. So we want to really do this to protect, help share anyone's files, even.
Right. And so the either for example, the suggestion on a different site where models might be shared of using this license would be great, of course. And I would say it's ironic at the same time that the only thing we would not like to see is that if you create a sort of a derivative of the license without offering the opportunity for us, not as sort of the owners of the whole license, but more, I would say, the stewards of the license, because our goal is not to really pull this towards us, but really to see this become, also through your feedback, for example, become something that well, it's for the web and it's by the web, basically.
And one specific point about this is there is one part in there that says that the license does not contravene our terms of service. That's just an extra thing put in there to kind of protect Imagine. And you could also at one point just change that to say this is not somebody else's terms of service. We put that in there and just as a last minute kind of thing. It could survive with that out of there, but then your terms of service is also kind of an extra protection thing. But specifically our terms of service and this 3DPL, we're doing it for everyone. It's not like we're really, having a lot of fun time high-fiving lawyers or whatever. This is something that we think needs to occur, although we really like our lawyers. But this is something that needs to happen and somebody needs to do it. That's kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, that was mostly to make sure that nobody would be confused that they're reading the terms of service while they're actually reading an optional 3DPL, optional 3D printing license, which somebody can associate to their design files.
Yeah, and so Mark Peters asked a similar question: does the file have to be on Imagine? Nope. So you can put it on your own website. You can put it on your own sharing thing. It could literally live on maybe something that you have some kind of modicum of control over, or somebody else's platform, or a different platform altogether. And we're okay with other people adopting it and using the license. So it definitely doesn't have to live at Imagine or be downloaded from there. That's not required. That's not. Yeah, we couldn't care less, actually, to be honest. Not very business-like of us, but.
Well, it's interesting that there might be sort of if you're asking is there a catch or something, it might almost look like a question like that. If there would be a catch, to me it seems like there's only one thing that we would like to ask of people, and that is also the thing that we're trying to promote, which is actually attribution. We're trying to originate this license because we think it is valuable, and so if there's hardly any feedback, then that would suggest that there's no real need for it. We are actually seeing that some people really care about this issue and are saying, okay, this is important, but we're seeing that the couple of voices that say this is important, they are important voices, and so we feel that we do feel that we should carry on with this. But we also want to sort of measure the amount of attention this grabs. But I've always found that the thing that we care about, we will only understand that we really cared about it once it's too late. So, and this is one of those times that we can be on time for once, and not face issues that we could have prevented if we were early enough to catch them. But talking about attribution, we're very keen on making sure what is actually going wrong quite a lot is the thing that, for example, it's unclear whether people are, when they're showing 3D prints in a video, and they're sort of creating, for example, a very popular video and benefiting from that commercially, or a company is showing off prints but not providing some way of attribution, for example, for the person who modeled the files, and thus actually displaying the actual file, for example. Does that determine that authorship has to be properly attributed, or is it showing the actual manifestation of it, something that requires attribution? There's some idea of fairness, at least, where you would say manifestation also requires this, but it's actually legally unclear whether that is actually one of the requirements, and whether you can require that. So this would also be an interesting discussion point. It's unclear how that could end up, possibly at the definition of attribution. So if you have any suggestions about that, definitely let us know.
Yeah. So just so you know, it's like also one thing that's led to a lot of questions. We'll probably get a question about it later. Is we have this thing where we say that the original designer can require you to put a mark on the object and not remove it. So why do we do that? We got a couple of questions on this, and then the reason for that is that if somebody would either reverse engineer the object, so scan it, and then 3D scan it, and then create it, or would rip it off a site, and then actually remove my sign or watermark or something like that I put on the object, then you can prove intent, or you can prove some kind of malicious intent, because you're actually taking an object that has rich wrap written on it, and you're getting rid of that. There's no saying like, "Oops, I didn't know," if you took someone's logo off or something. The step up from this, as anticipating on Mark's question, is what we would really want to do is to give people the ability to kind of be a kind of timeline of when things were invented, of course, but that's a much longer term project for us to try to do that. So that would be where we would see this playing a role in dispute resolution. In the other sense, what we really want to do is we want to have QR codes or short URLs on objects. So Eric, for example, is a great example, actually, that Eric has this thing on his desk and he broke it and he didn't know where he got it from, so he can't find it anymore. So we want there to be a human readable and machine readable code on this that goes back to my personal website or Imagine or some other repository or whatever, so that this person can be physically attributed by something they find in the real world. So if this thing goes not viral on the internet, but viral on like in a high school somewhere, that people will actually be able to know who created the thing. And what we hope to do is make that an option for creators to put that mark on there, so that everybody is created or is attributed in that sense. The reason why we didn't more explicitly do this in the license at the moment is because we had a big discussion with our lawyers about this, because theoretically, if, let's say, I put my mark on there, it says Joris Peels on there, Eric prints it out and sells it, and the lawyer sees my mark on here, then I may, as a designer, actually be held, or that lawyer may sue me as a designer for being the manufacturer, because my mark is on there, even though I'm not the manufacturer. And that's one of these little things where we're, on the one hand, we want a watermark, a physical watermark on things. We think it's very valuable for users and designers. On the other hand, we think it's great for any kind of legal case, but we're just seeing that might actually lead to higher chance of liability by the original designer, because there's a mark that leads to you, and then the lawyer could assume that you are the manufacturer, even though you were just the designer.
Yeah, so there's sort of a juxtaposition between traceability and accountability. You can be held accountable for flaws in the design, even though to some extent the flaw might be generated by differences in printing process properties or parameters. So either there's a variation in material, or the printer has a failure and one of the layers is missing, but it's hardly visible because most of it is missing on the inside and not on the outside, for example. For communities like, for example, Enable, somebody already disabled might actually get disabled even further if their hand breaks, for example, their 3D printed hand. So and if it's actually seen as something that is also marketed, for example, as a prosthetic device, it might actually be considered a medical device. And so the claims could actually be pretty high. And those are sort of the things where we want to see if we can protect the community. But the problem is also that if we, there might be actually a problem, an interesting problem, if we go through too great lengths to protect the community. We might actually end up becoming sort of the single source that you can still sue. You cannot just disclaim any responsibility from a contract if you actually do have responsibility. So we're trying to see if we can sort of make it reasonable. So because actually somebody should have the possibilities to sue somebody if that is actually a reasonable thing. If there is somehow sort of gross negligence or something, and there's a good basis for it. Of course, it does make sense to have some sort of a lawsuit or a dispute in a lighter sense, not necessarily a lawsuit.
So Mark Peters also asked about disputes, and he says how disputes might be resolved. So on the one hand, we have it calls for arbitration. In real, if we see these cases happening, what really happens is that some guy says something on Twitter and there's an email exchange, and that's how this is actually resolved usually. And when big companies come to heel, let's say, and do pay, let's say, the little guy who created the thing, what's usually happened is that they're worried about the PR fallout. So the actual legalities of the thing matter very little in the cases we're seeing at the very moment. It's actually more a PR story.
That's something we cannot definitely. There will be a moment where something really serious will happen, or some extreme money is getting made, and somebody really feels ripped off and wants to claim and sue. Although it's interesting actually, because we're talking a lot of legalese right now, and it really feels like I'm already sort of approaching some I would say zero-sum game thinking. But that is actually a big part of what legal things assume. And so it's interesting actually that two worlds are actually meeting. It's similar to how the GPL is actually based on copyright. And at the same time, the GPL is actually doing actually the opposite of what copyright is designed to do. So copyright is designed to limit. And for example, the GPL is designed to preserve the rights, the freedoms associated with manipulating something. So actually the opposite of limiting. But it actually needs the limitation. So you have to be able to limit somebody to also apply the same license to make it sustainable. Because otherwise, after one iteration, the license will become irrelevant because somebody can relicense it, yeah, the license gets lost, and so this is a similar situation where we want this license to sustain collaboration on a certain item, but also deal with the option for somebody to choose, because we want somebody to have the freedom to choose to get something back on, get some sort of return on an investment if somebody took spent a lot of time on it. I would say that the one really insightful remark is also whether some design is purely artistic, for example, and which might actually be susceptible to becoming mashed up, which is sort of a mimetic evolution at some point, where somebody's head or something gets added to a lot of objects. What is the creativity in that, and would that be seen as just a sort of a culturally accepted kind of use, or would that be a different case? And then really functional objects where people might have spent a lot of time to get a certain mechanism working, might that be something that somebody would want to have a return on?
Yeah. So it also depends on legal area and what is classed in. So anyway, Mark Peters' question again was, where can the taxonomy be identified? At the moment, no. If you're seeing in these cases, it also depends what right is being infringed. Is it copyright, whatever, design rights, or a patent, or whatever. But typically, it's on a case-by-case basis by the judge in question, or judges in question, that they decide the taxonomy. They decide how something looks or is developed as a thing. So that's how it happens at the moment. Of course, we think that sites like ours, but also our competitors and other people doing similar things, will be able to make that much, much more clear. But in the current legal situation, just the judge decides, essentially, based on information. Just by where the design was publicly published, that's something that people always will look at. It doesn't have to mean anything, because it could be patented, that kind of thing. So if you do invent something, by the way, do publish it, and there's also kind of prior art type of database type of things that you could send your design to that will actually log that, because it's not clear that, well, publish is well defined in certain cases, but not in all. So maybe you publish something on Twitter, but maybe that doesn't count. But maybe you do publish something in the local newspaper or in a particular forum, GitHub, whatever, that may count depending on the jurisdiction you're in.
One interesting thing would be actually to use SAH256 signatures, for example. So a good crypto hash to allow traceability to happen, but at the same time not have somebody's name on there if they don't necessarily want it. And then from that hash, for example, several, so not necessarily just Umagine, but several platforms would be able to create a reverse lookup where the hash will actually be, you input part of the hash and then you find actually the design that is associated with that. So that would allow the traceability to happen. That would allow people to provide attribution, but also print, for example, that missing part or something that has broken that is part of that assembly that you've printed, or do a reprint at all. So anyway, we should probably go to Richard Horn's interesting comment about automatic payment system.
Richard says that many pick to a non-commercial license because they don't want people to profit from their idea design. It would be really nice to get more people to allow commercial. I always share for commercial use, but it's very rare for anyone to offer anyone benefit back, even when they're making a lot of sales. Just don't put many off, but for many that's a slap. The main issue: how would you set up a chain of designers, contributors, and would you imagine sort out payments? And what if you don't want to be in a chain, but have contributed opt in, opt out? Okay, so on the one hand, I do want to so we're not doing this to profit off of it. That's very, very important. We're not doing this to profit off of the license in and of itself. This isn't going to be like, first we do the license, then we give you all this cute stuff, and then we come up with some kind of magical, mystical, connect everybody payments platform. So on the one hand, what we're talking about before, all these things we want to build, and something like this, like getting a pyramid of people to profit from innovation, is something we may at one point do, but it's not.
I think it is a very inspiring thought to have. I think this is also related to Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans idea, that if distributed innovation is really even going to take off more than it already is, and I would say that RepRap is a great example of this already happening, but actually there's user innovation happening everywhere on almost every object that you can think of. People are modifying them because there's somebody who cares about almost everything and cares a lot about it and wants to make a different thing out of it, or wants it to do some other kind of job. And so this innovation happens, and that's definitely an important aspect. So we're innovating on physical objects, probably even more than on software in the near future, because simply it's more intuitive to interact with physical objects and think, okay, this could be done better. And if we would be able to do that in software, that would be great. If everybody could be a programmer, that would be great. But programming is to some extent still very much symbolic, and it's not something we've sort of evolved around. And things that actually happen in the physical space is something we're much more familiar with, evolutionary, at least. So it's very relevant, and I think this is an interesting question about the chain of payment system, for example, because it's similar to how the power of defaults will influence, for example, whether people will donate or not. For example, there's an example of Radiohead getting, with voluntary payments, getting actually a very significant amount of revenue from their album. And still allowing everybody who's just interested in giving it a try. So there's really this sort of a curve where most of the people will not actually pay. And then a lot of people who would not otherwise have actually learned about this album would pay a little bit. And then there are some really diehard fans that even pay much more than the average, for example, and would actually create a significant amount of income. And so in many cases, actually, the sort of the peak, the highest frequency number of payments, which is usually 0, is actually not just bringing in money. Is not bringing in the money directly, but actually they're bringing in money indirectly, because they start talking about something that they would not even have actually listened to if they had this sort of gateway model where you only get it when you pay for it. And then if we bring it a little bit into the discussion of where Imagine is going, which is, well, of course, a little bit related. What we don't want to see is Imagine becoming sort of this gateway-based system where you only get to download something after you make a payment, for example. So sort of we crowdsource ideas on Imagine, and it becomes really a website that is for profit, and where you can only use those sites. It's never going to work. That's not what I feel like it will work, but it's also not something we believe in. So basically, we believe in really making sure that people can easily take something because it was given as a design, and somebody can actually make it better, for example, or take it in their own direction. So the derivative idea is really important. So there's no derivative. No non-derivative part.
That's also important. I mean, a lot of people we have a remix, and you have to remix, and everything that you So you can't just not say not let people remix under this license. This is also kind of a philosophical thing. We think that everyone stands on the shoulders of giants and everyone gets to be a giant essentially. So we didn't even put that option in there to not have people remix your thing.
It doesn't mean that you don't have the option. It's just that there you have to choose another license for that. And licenses do exist that have non-derivative. So Creative Commons non-derivative. We see adoption by that, for example, by artists that don't want their work to be sort of manipulated and changed into something else, which I can to some extent understand. At the same time, I think it is also credits to your creativity if people will want to actually use that as a basis for their own creativity. But that's a different issue.
But Richard, talking about Richard's thing, I think this chain of contributors thing, if somebody's directly interested in commercializing, kind of a quirky type service, or directly interested in commercializing design work in and of itself, then this is a solvable issue, and it could be a really key part of like startup. It'd be really easy to get money right now to say startup it's like Kickstarter for 3D models, but then on a Tuesday we have a payment system in there. That's totally a solved issue that someone's going to find out how to do eventually. It's not, we don't see it as like a challenge or something.
We have sort of a distinction between what the license should be dealing with. But that's in a way that's our opinion. So please comment on it. But I think a license should not create necessarily in itself a complete mechanism for people to, for example, handle payments. You cannot really add a transaction system, for example, or add a PayPal option right into the license, because that would be basically too specific for a license to deal with those kinds of things. And so I think it would actually make sense for example, Imagine or other websites to make use of the combination of the 3DPL to have in combination with the non-com aspect. So if you select that, make it very easy for people to start on a website, start earning money by just having that site distribute the design. So basically putting something into a resource where you can share, or into a repository where you can share the design, it will attract a certain audience. So if you put it on Imagine, you will attract people who want to download it, and if it's made really easy for you to earn money on it, that would be really a great thing. And so there might be some part of a commission, which for example, for Imagine, we want to make expectations clear. We want to create those mechanisms, and to some extent we might actually make that an optional fee that will sort of be 0% or up to 5%, or maybe you can select a higher fee that will go towards Imagine for providing that transaction, and some transaction costs might be deducted from it. But the majority should definitely go to the original creator of that design. Having that, there might be an attribution chain at some point where one innovation is actually a composition of a lot of innovations, and that's where sort of the complexity starts becoming a problem. So I'm not sure if we should try to solve that completely. There might be mechanisms to say, okay, there are several parts that have been made by somebody else, but they're used in an assembly here, and sort of distribute the payment across several users. That might be an interesting thing, but it might actually be better to start off a little bit simpler.
Yeah, we don't.
Well, that would be an interesting discussion as well. But it's really more about creating those mechanisms for allowing people to earn money, and sort of the legal document with the non-commercial clause might become actually the basis for it. And so it might be a good starting point, and that's why we have to deal with it appropriately. And then a website that actually is to some extent for profit. For example, for Imagine, our mission is really to encourage this creativity, but we also want to sustain innovation for Imagine. So we're trying to hire more programmers to work on it. We really don't feel that we're going fast enough, and we probably will never feel that we're going fast enough, even if we hire a lot of people. But we think that Imagine should definitely be one of the best sites out there, or probably the best website out there for people to share. So basically, well, we've had some discussion about actually what should Imagine be. A little bit off topic, sorry about that. but one of the things is actually, should it be sort of the GitHub for 3D models? And we do think that actually 3D printing should be something that is intuitive for non-programmers. So, and to some extent, GitHub is a great example of a company, of course, that is doing well, but also doing well for the bigger community out there who are creating things, and also making it easy to find, for example, good software to base something on or to work with. And so it's a good thing to have an ecosystem where people care about creativity, and at the same time, it is a company. So to some extent, it is an attractive model to compare ourselves against, although comparison is always a tricky thing, because we want to be imagined and not necessarily GitHub for 3D models. We want to be different in some respects. So the comparison is not perfect, but it's quite accurate, except for the user experience. We'd like the user experience to be even better than GitHub, and less jargon-based and less technical. But let's get back on topic.
So the general idea is this is something we're doing for anyone who would. So we did maybe mix things up a little bit by talking about the company generally, but but this license is meant for people who compete with us, and who so we'd like it to be able to fit into whatever business model somebody else finds with this also, whether they be offering like a Kickstarter for 3D models or just a straight up download site. And we ourselves. We're also kind of searching also for a way to find a business, but meanwhile we're trying to build things that help everyone. So any site that, from your personal website to a large corporate to a file repository, any site that would want to have people remix stuff. So yeah, so Mark Peter says watermarks, great idea, but a lot of objects are going to be too small. I think at the moment, yeah.
I have an idea about that, but it will be interesting if there were more than 1,000 people watching. Somebody will definitely be interested or have this sort of missing link on this idea. What I was thinking of that you want, so the barcodes that have more data on it are usually 2D barcodes. So basically, that's with a grid, you have some surface area where you can put some. Put a sort of enough QR pixels on it to put enough data in it that you can have a big enough namespace for objects, and the namespace needs to be big enough, so you need sort of enough bits. The problem with that is that it also takes up surface area on your print, and usually the surface area is not actually flat, because not every object has flat parts. And definitely in the future, when, for example, printing with supports becomes more standard thing, we will not have this nice flat bottom, which objects will be designed for. So we might actually want a 1D barcode, but the interesting thing is we have very tiny layer heights nowadays when we're printing. The object resolution is pretty good. So if we want to do that, sort of scan the surface visually, for example, with a camera phone, then it's going to be tricky to have enough resolution and have the sharpness with your camera that you need, actually, the good focus, basically. So what I was thinking of, if you have a specifically made for that object or a very standard option like a paperclip, object like a paperclip, if you would drag it across the surface in an area where there would be sort of a depiction of that this is a symbol which you can sort of scan across with your either with your fingernail or with that paperclip, then you would have sort of an audio signal that the phone or an application or your web browser would be able to interpret with WebRTC or something, and then that audio signal being converted back to the URL, basically, where you can find it, or the signature of the file.
If I do Bronzeville or something, it's gonna.
Well, if somebody manages to implement that, you're my hero. But yeah, I was thinking.
But meanwhile, it's a valid point. I mean, I think we have discussed this internally, especially with what Eric said, the complexity of objects increasing in materials, and also the definition between them. I think that's always going to be an issue, I think.
At least I was thinking of a way to sort of there's a problem that if you want the surface area to be very small, so it's not a distraction, this watermark, because the watermarks are annoying in many cases. If you just look at the images, if they're really big, then they allow some traceability, but at the same time they reduce the I would say the value of the object as well. So yeah, there's a trade-off, and if you can make the surface small enough by making it a 1D, for example, that might actually help. So maybe somebody can build on that idea and think about it.
Yeah, it's a good idea, but it is a good point. What else? Yeah, some sort of marking fit for use, Richard Horn, like a CE marking and that kind of thing. So a lot of these things are very interesting. And this does not constitute legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, but do also wonder if you do say something is a toy, and you do publicly proclaim yourself as being a seller or a manufacturer of toys and sell toys, that does in some cases convey a higher burden on yourself than if you didn't say it was a toy.
You say that it might actually be more suitable for children, and if you imply that, it might actually make you more legally liable.
Yeah. So the thing is, with these things, manufacturers don't put all these things on their products because they want to. They do so because they have to.
And from what we've learned so far is that even if you put something like choking hazard on it, it might actually imply that if you don't put that on it, and there is an option to add the choking hazard symbol to it, for example, if that becomes something that is, it might actually imply when you don't put it on it that you're saying there's no choking hazard. So I would say that these areas where you really talk about safety or suitability for something, once you make any claims there, it can actually become more problematic than you think. So you might actually have the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, with a lot of legal stuff, the more you do, the more you know, the more you're in trouble. Yeah. That's
what we've heard so far, but we're not trying to be the fountain of knowledge in terms of the legal sense, because that's not really our area. So basically, it would have been really great if we had more people who had a lot of legal experience and a lot of knowledge about these liability issues. But
yeah. So Scott Knowles, sorry.
Everybody who has commented so far, thank you very much for those comments, because they're really helpful also to structure our discussion around it. But also they show that you're actually that you care about this and that you have thought about this. So thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Way back when, it's like the moon landing. You can talk about it to your grandkids. Symbol like the plastic symbol. Scott Knowles mentioned that he's trying to get the plastic symbol on there. There's another, this is also one of these little things that our little industry is not set out to put out there. Under what conditions do you have to put a label what type of plastic it is and what category of plastic it is? In the European Union, for example, these are things that could be trivial and could be quite complicated. I mean,
interestingly, you could go farther than actually applying a symbol. This is this material, because you know the exact 3D model, so you could actually have information about disassembly and not just about so basically what you could do is you could reference, if you have the signature of the file, you could reference a manual for using the object. So if it's an attachment for a screwdriver, which screwdriver is it compatible with, or which drill bits, or so you could go much farther than having helpful information about recycling. You could have a lot of associated information, including attribution. So interestingly, with the watermark, which actually it keeps on coming up in this discussion, it's definitely something we should deal with, I think, because it can actually solve a lot of problems, but it's also a tricky issue in terms of possible liability, being able to trace something.
So Richard Horn asked, have we had any takedown issues? He's referring to the DMCA Digital Millennium Copyright Act. If you're unfamiliar with this, it is typically defined as an email you send to someone basically threatening them with all sorts of American legal hell if they don't take something off their website. We ourselves have not, in this sense, really had any issues with that. We know it happens, let's say, between 5 and a dozen times to our industry generally across the board. Well, people have to understand, the DMCA is a kind of a tactical nuclear weapon, a legal tactical nuclear weapon. But also a lot of these DMCA takedowns are just like a semi-automated process where a law firm gets paid $2,000 a month or whatever to just take everything, scrub everything on the internet with a certain brand name. So it's a lot of an automated process, and it's not really... so that's interesting. Also about the Left Shark, Caddy Perry Left Shark, that's what Richard also asked about. What we saw with the Left Shark thing is a typical kind of resolution for this. Caddy, there was this meme that originated. Caddy Perry had performed at the NFL game, Super Bowl, and Left Shark was apparently very popular. A guy made a Left Shark thing, uploaded to Shapeways, and started selling it. Exactly one of the benefits of our technology. It was a DMCA sent, and then the person was then actually defend himself by using a college professor, always a good thing to do. And essentially, it was a very open and cut case where you look at this. If any lawyer would have looked at this thing, sending a DMCA over a shark costume was probably never ever going to work, because you can't really copyright fashion or costumes,
because it's non-functional, and physical objects are actually you can apply a patent to it, for example, but not if it's just an artistic thing, but you can apply a patent if it has actual functionality and novelty, and if there's some inventiveness associated with it. So fashion rarely defines that definition, so you cannot really protect it, and probably
so what happened is, in this thing, everybody was talking about this being an IP 3D printing issue, but it really became as some lawyer probably just reflexively sent this an automated query, like you have an email notification. It probably does automatically, because if they would have actually looked at this for 10 minutes and said, hey, it's a costume, it's probably not going to work. So they just use this either incorrectly or just automatically. And then Katy Perry's lawyer people decided to back down because it was completely unwinnable. So it doesn't really have to do much with IP, whereas in the media it did come off as an IP case. It was basically Katy Perry's PR people going, what are we going to win with this? Nothing. And then they dropped it. So it was just like, yeah, okay. So Adam J has the designer watermark could be an NFC tag, near field communication tag in the thing. It will take us a while to print NFC tags.
Well, I think it's interesting. I've seen people actually adding NFC tags into it, but interestingly, unless it becomes a standard practice to do it, you still need some sort of decal or some sort of visual marker that it has an NFC chip inside, or people will have to sort of scan every object to figure out if it has a NFC tag inside. So I think it would be interesting, because you could add more information to the NFC tag, and not just in the URL, but also attribution information. And so even offline, you would be able to do something. The NFC chip, if it has enough memory, it could actually even have the source model in there. So if it's an OpenSCAD file, they're usually kilobytes at most.
You can share.
You could actually share the actual model inside the model, and that would be very interesting, because it's really like nature, having the DNA and the physical phenotype that results from it, having both of them, having the physical representation and its genotype, basically, the source code, which definitely gives you bonus points. So
it would be cool.
It's a really great idea. I think NFC chips are getting cheaper by the day, or RFID tags, basically, and so they're definitely available for about 10 cents. Not all of them are actually writable. Many of them are readable, and you could attach, for example, to that existing code, you could attach you could add that to a database, basically. So that might actually be an interesting way to go about it. Use cheap tags and embed it into every object. It still requires people to actually use that practice widely before it becomes interesting for people to scan the tags. I'm not actually sure, because it doesn't really necessarily apply to just 3D printing. People could manufacture things and NFC or add tags to them. But there's also a lot of criticism on traceability. For example, if you walk around with objects that have RFID inside, it would allow people to find out sensitive information about you. So whatever you're carrying in the backpack becomes visible, even if you have your backpack closed. So there might be issues there. I just thought of it.
This is very scary.
Yeah, maybe we're making it more complicated than it needs.
So you could I could steal your design from your backpack.
Wow, yeah, you could steal the source code, and then you would not actually be stealing something physically. And actually, there's a good question whether you're stealing, because that's really zero-sum thinking as well. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the future.
Interesting concepts.
So Richard Horn has a question about this. Yeah, you like the safety and legal issues. One of the main things driving the 3DPL. It's one of the things driving the 3DPL. It's definitely stuff we worried about. Do you think you can make clear and understandable enough for everyone to know what they're getting into? Okay, the thing is, what they're agreeing to is, see, the scary bit is not it does not have to do with the 3DPL. It is, what do you agree to when you're a person that manufactures something? And the real issue comes from either if you're selling a final object commercially and selling a final object or selling your product, let's say, especially to a consumer. And that is something that does not exist because of the 3DPL. It's liability, consumer protection legislation, these kind of things. So this would depend on where you are. Like in some countries, it would be the contractor that would get sued for when a house is incorrect. In other countries, it could be the architect. So it really depends on which jurisdiction you're in and where this occurs. It doesn't have much to do with us. So what you're agreeing to in the 3DPL we will try to make this as clear as we can. At the same time, what you are agreeing to by selling a physical object, especially to a consumer, is probably something that is underappreciated. So that from the cell, yeah, we know it'd be really wonderful for us just to go kumbaya, my lord, and just hope that everyone will make everything on a desktop 3D printer tomorrow, that kind of stuff. But there are real risks if you are, everyone's going to have a factory in their own house. Yeah, but what does that mean with consumer protection legislation and stuff like that? So, but those are things that exist in and of themselves outside the existence of the 3DPL. And we do try to inform people about that, but we will never be able to do that completely because selling a product in Mexico could be very different than doing that in Belgium. And that's not something we can completely protect you from, or you can completely protect yourself from.
I'm thinking of Richard Horn's comment about safety cubes. I think everything else might actually be dangerous, but even the safety cube might be dangerous because you don't know which scale people will print it at. So there's a problem there again. So there are objects you could put a hole in it so you can still breathe through it. But if you make it small enough, then you still have a problem. Or anyway. So yeah.
Do not scale beyond.
The problem is that it's interesting actually because legal contracts don't necessarily solve a lot of issues in general. There's a bit of a problem there. Interestingly, if they're based on something that is sort of common morale or morally right, then at least they have a good basis. But and they're actually easier to defend as well and uphold. So they were sort of aiming for something where it is actually based on reason and it is reasonable. One thing I want to mention is actually that what we want to bake into the knowledge is there's a thin line because we'd like to bake in maximum protection for you as an author. For example, so you've designed something and people are going to go nuts with it, print it all the time, give it to all of their kids and give it to children on the street. And then there might be a problem with that because somebody breaks a finger or something happens. And so we want to give you maximum protection, but if we actually explicitly say that this license will ensure that you will have no problems whatsoever, then we will not be able to uphold this license or host it much longer because somebody will sue us, basically.
We can uphold it for a while.
Well, yeah,
do you like your house?
So basically, that would be a very bad decision for us to explicitly say that this is a good license to ensure you will not have any problems in terms of a legal sense. We can never claim that, and we will never claim that it gives you a good protection. What we can do is really try to bake in some protection that may actually help you, and that's sort of the limit of what we can probably say, because basically we want to be around to help preserve this license, help maintain it, and so that would be important.
So Scott also says, it gets complicated, as you say. When it gets complicated, people can back off. It's definitely the case. I mean, again, we could present this much simpler and make the license even simpler. We tried to make it quite simple and have a summary and make it all very human readable. But we didn't want to make it too simple because then, again, people might not realize that there are some issues, and it's not, when the digital world meets the real world and there's the next wave of digitization, there are going to be things that are going to be happening and want to be ready for that. He puts, I think he's talking about, Adam J is talking about, I apply them to all kinds of prints mid-print, brings my prints to life. That's NFC, I guess, NFC attack.
Well, the NFC or RFID tags, they're an interesting concept in itself. I'm sort of getting ideas about it already. Because if you have an object and you put it, for example, next to a printer or close to a printer which has an NFC scanner, the printer would be able to make another duplication, another version of it. That would be interesting to have some sort of capability like that.
Or have a rubber object.
It would also make it more interesting for people to embed NFC chips in there, at least programmable ones, because it could be programmed with the 3D printer after being printed, for example, or during printing, and then allow people to make more of the same object by just tapping it against their 3D printer. So, okay, this is out there now. It cannot be patented anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if Google Hangouts counts as
prior art. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think so, and so please don't patent this.
Scott Knowles also likes the NFC, that it could be proved difficult for people with less skill to implement. I think that should become quite easy. I mean, one point, one of these tags is going to really be a really gigantic thing, and Disney's betting very, very large on this type of technology. So I think that's it was always a chicken and the egg thing, and then I think if the NFC thing will become much bigger and much easier than now. Richard Horn is saying, "Hell, you could strangle yourself with 3D printing filament. Panic." Yeah,
don't panic.
Don't panic. No, but yeah, but essentially, I mean, I think on the one hand, there is a Brave New World out here, but then again, Brave New World was kind of a really sad book. So it is. There are a lot of really worrying, really complicated, really annoying things that people are now realizing that may make this a little bit complex. And as we grow from a little small group of nerds to a bigger group of nerds to a bunch of money-grubbing MBA people plus nerds. To a multi-billion-dollar industry that's growing very quickly, people will have to kind of come to grips with making a new reality, and then coming up with legal structures that fit this distributed innovation model. So so it's time for us to kind of it is complex. Yes, it is annoying. Yes, it may be easy, maybe a little bit boring, but it is something we're going to need to do at one point, because the current patent system does not, or the current legal system is a bit too slow for what we're doing. Adam is, imagine a print store where you can pick up the display print of the object you want and just place it on a platform to be replicated. Okay. We don't like to use the word replicated around the office, but Richard asks, I think that's the issue. The designer has to take responsibility for use, but they don't have control over the production stage. Yeah, would agree with you completely. A manufacturer usually assumes an integrated company where the designer, the manager, the boss, the worker, everyone is part of this one chain, and you get to be the manufacturer, and your mark is on the object, and we will sue you if there's something right. And now, the splitting of these things by having Eric as a designer, I'm the remixer. You print it out, and somebody else sells it.
And somebody else uses it. There might be actually liability in using something as well.
Yeah. So
at least it's important that if somebody uses that object or manufactures it and gives it to somebody, that they've actually had the opportunity to read the license that they are actually accepting when making use of that object or printing it. That you cannot just for no reason claim that either somebody else who has manufactured it or yourself might manufacture something that is perfect in all cases, because the design will allow it to be printed on any kind of printer, basically. So that you still need your own judgment to, for example, assess whether the print is fragile or actually very strong, and whether it's suitable for its application, because a designer cannot, in all cases, be held accountable for a lot of things that are not under his control. And at least that they should not be held accountable, and of course somebody can hold them accountable, even if it's wrongly so. So at least this license will support the attribution of this accountability to some extent, and so in that sense it will be helpful. And this is one of these areas where this is a unique opportunity for the license to really add something compared to, for example, Creative Commons, because in Creative Commons, well, really product liability for a certain image doesn't really exist. If looking at an image will never really hurt somebody, except for maybe some rare cases of some images, maybe. But not going into specific examples.
You've never been to 4chan.
No, but actually with product liability, it's a much more real issue. And these are specifically the things, if you have your manufacturing process, which can be widely diverse. So even between printers of the same model, one print might actually end up perfectly right, and another print, the next print might actually not be perfect at all, and it might actually be invisible, hard to assess from the outside. That is actually a real problem that somebody might actually really depend on that part.
Yeah. So we the second part of Richard Horn's question was like, make a clip or handle design, share for free, and someone prints it and damages some property. So the cool thing, by the way, is that generally if you do share stuff for free, you don't make money off of it, you're not the manufacturer, you're not the designer, then of course there is a lot less. It's more like you bake a cake for your neighbor and he dies of food poisoning. You're not going to be treated in the same way as if that would happen in a restaurant. So that would be, it's a different example, and there's a lot of leeway for people just actually sharing things instead of if you would sell something. But I think Richard Horn's general point is definitely valid. I mean, we've all seen this 3D printed gun nonsense. It's nonsense, but if you give the guy enough media attention and you give him enough money, then eventually, of course, he's going to make it, right? But initially, of course, it was non-functional and very poorly designed, whatever. But we see that our potential as a technology to do a lot of things, and it depends on what people will do with this creativity and this time. And I do think, there is a risk that at one point, something's going to go wrong. There's enough of these systems out there, and there's enough of these systems out there that at one point some mishap is going to occur. And we should be ready for that.
Well, the whole idea is to make this license robust. So if you have any ideas to make this license robust against, for example, a future situation, and this could be a likely thing if this license becomes a sort of the de facto standard for licensing 3D printable stuff, it will give people a possible level of protection. So if it does protect somebody, that might be a good case for wider adoption. And at some point, it might actually become the standard. So if we don't think about this very well now, so basically you guys in this chat right now, and the people who have commented on Medium, they are sort of the founders of this license. So it is actually, although I do like definitely the comments that are quite funny, it is actually a serious thing in the future, because there will be, for example, people actually, if this becomes the general standard, are getting serious injury, for example, by using something that they thought they could use for a certain purpose because they saw a video of somebody who printed it, it worked fine, and then they start using that themselves, and they use that object and they get injured. And there might be actually huge claims associated with it. So having enough protection in there, but not so much protection that people will rely on it and just forget about any responsibility that they might actually reasonably have. That's not a good situation. So there should be enough protection, but people would also have to have a reasonable assessment of what that protection could be, and also how limited that protection could actually be in practice. Because you could always be sued by somebody, how reasonable it is or unreasonable it is, it doesn't matter.
And so Richard asks, what about different design types, file types, like alpha release, beta release?
Designation types.
Yeah, designation types of the file. That would be a nice idea. Maybe just look at it, but then again, it would be up to the individual user to define when something is alpha, when something is beta, when something is finished.
I think this is a really good point, and it actually adds value. And again, I think it might be interesting if you really do think that it should be part of the license. Because depicting something as a reliable thing or not, if you make that part of the legal part of it, it might actually make you more liable. So it would probably be advisable to never put it in the non-beta stage. Because if somebody has a problem, you will be less liable. And so if the purpose for the legal document is to really have a legal basis, and you would use that legal tool, because you're using a legal tool, not just some arbitrary document. And so people are agreeing to that license, and they're basically undergoing a contract with this person, which can be a good thing if the license is robust and is well thought out. And we want that to be the case. And you can help make that the case. At the same time, I think it could definitely be a problem if we make reliability assessment really part of that license. At the same time, it is actually very helpful to, with a design, for example, if we would add something to Imagine, where which is the thing I really like about Thingiverse, is that you can make something that is a work in progress design. We've added sort of a section where you could actually add an idea which is in a more conceptual stage, but this is sort of an intermediate thing. You actually have files, and you can actually state that this is something you could work on and refine it, or you could give me comments to help me refine it. But I want to put this out there. It's not finished. That's an interesting state to have something in and also already be shared. I think in many cases in sort of the workflow for people, you can almost never release something too early if you want to have good feedback, and if you want something to really become good, because it really needs the ideas of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and Richard mentions that he likes the idea of a crowd-approved kind of fitness type of judgment. Get more confidence about a model.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, I think this is it's a great idea to just generally have the crowd determine a lot of things, and yeah, and Richard's pointing to the printability.
Yeah. Interesting, actually, it matters a lot whether you start averaging the numbers. So if sort of 10 people say, "Oh, it's a great object, it worked fine for me," and then one person got seriously badly injured because of the object, if you average it out, it's still sort of 9-ish, or it's still pretty reliable. And people might think, okay, it's a 9, so 9 out of 10, that's fine. I'll print it, and the next person gets injured. That might be an interesting opportunity actually for the license, or for this sort of reliability voting or assessment. It doesn't have to be reliability related. It could also be suitability related, or it could be about a different aspect. But it's interesting if we don't average it out in a single number, but really show the diagram, or this frequency gave. So there's a section of people that gave it an 8, some gave it a 9, and some people seriously had problems with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can make your own assessment, and then it would also be responsibility of a person to make their own assessment based on not what an authority is saying, claiming about the thing, because for example, you imagine it might be a problem if we start making assessments about reliability or suitability.
Yeah.
But if the community does it, there's no single person responsible for that review, basically, and it's probably clear for people to know that we're basically channeling those assessments from people to other people, and just making something helpful out there, which is not necessarily an authoritative approval.
Yeah, but we like to always think that also the crowds are, somehow wise, and somehow, okay, there is some wisdom in crowds and creativity, and we're trying to unlock that, and also as well what the site is doing. And we do believe in distributed innovation, but also at the same time, yeah, maybe 100 people really like the nuclear fission reactor I uploaded to the site, but the one guy who actually knows what he's doing, the nuclear physicist, is not okay with it, right? Those are the cases where crowds may get it wrong, let's say.
And interestingly, actually, we're getting a really good remarks, not just on the license, but actually this is a good remark for Imagine itself. It's something we've been playing a lot with the idea of printability, which is not necessarily about reliability, but still, if something is really challenging to print, the reliability of the print is usually lower. And so, interestingly, we're thinking we have this printability aspect, but people are interpreting it wrong in some cases. They're just thinking, okay, I can rate this print, and it's all about whether it's a nice design or not, or I like it or not, and they give either a high rating or a low rating. And actually, what we intended actually with that rating is really to allow people to judge the printability. And so, if something is really challenging to print, but it's just a massively interesting and complicated shape. So, for example, it's for example, one of those enable hands that are actually flexible and that are using very exotic materials, and they're great if you can actually print them, but chances are, if you're an inexperienced 3D printer user, you're not going to print it, or you need very specific exotic material. In those kinds of cases, it's okay to say the printability is low. It's hard to print at this point, and then possibly you should be able to select also which printer. For example, it is hard to print with. It might actually be easy to print with SLA, or hard to print with SLA and not for FDM, or hard to print for FDM. It would actually allow people to know whether with their printer it would be difficult or hard or easy to use this file to make the actual object. That would actually add some value. We might actually make something similar for reliability, but maybe if it becomes more clear that it's not the design merit or the quality of the design that people are voting on, but several aspects, and only after you've downloaded something, allow people to assess the printability, because it's better if you've printed it and to assess the printability than when you haven't actually tried even printing it. Because sometimes it's very hard to assess something comes out surprisingly well because it is designed to do it, but designed to be printed well, but it's not apparent from the picture, for example, before you open it in Cura or any other application. It's a good comment, actually. So I think actually it would be interesting to have another hangout on Umagine related issues, suggestions, where you want want us to take Umagine, because Umagine is something we're making this for you guys. So we could definitely do that as well. Because, well, the 3D printing license is something we're really excited about, but of course Umagine also deserves a hangout like this with the nice quality feedback from you guys. So thanks already for that. So let's see if we have more comments.
There are more comments or questions, because I will outline the process to you. We will first we collect all our feedback. We did some stuff on Quora, some stuff on social media stuff, and just the website and Medium, and this call also, and some other things just one-on-one offline, let's say. So we're gonna throw that all together, organize it, find out what we need to change, what we want to update, and then we'll get back to you. It depends really on necessarily what we're going to have to change or what time period. We hope to finish this process quite soon, so we hope to move along, and then we'll keep you posted. We're getting Richard is just generally saying that he's really helping to see. For me, it's been a really good and useful discussion. It's really helping me see what needs to go into the license and separate lots of other good ideas and going to help the site. I hope that others will also picked up on this split. Great talk, guys. Well done. Please get in touch. Totally. If you have any ideas or have any people that are interested in this, do get them in touch with us. Thank you so much for being a part of this and giving us some feedback, and we will get back to you in a couple of weeks with the updated license to reflect this and other feedback. Yeah. And thank you so much. And you can tell your grandkids that you were here, man.
No, well, and also if after this this hangout you come up with an idea or something that you really think should be part of the license, or when you're reading it maybe for a second time you think, okay, this part really sucks, please just let us know that it sucks, because that's really important, because we should find out now and not a lot later. That's why we're putting it out there now. So it's really like an actual product. If you want it to be really good, release it in the state where you are slightly embarrassed about it, because then it actually gets more feedback, and we need this feedback in an early stage, because we want to know if we've hit sort of important issues early on, or whether we're missing something really big. And if it looks all completely refined, then you might actually think, oh, this sounds really good, and accept it right now, and the overall quality might be lower than it would be in the long run if it would get more criticism early on. So anyway, thanks a lot. If you get any additional comments, please send it. And thanks for joining in.
Yes, and thank you so much for your time, and enjoy your day.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.